Hello. My head itches. All right. So, I'm gonna get to it. It's September 18th, 2023. And my heart's going boom 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 boom. Hold on, let this truck drive by. Ay, Dios mío. You might be asking, what's wrong with her? I'm gonna tell you right now. So, I'm starting this Bible study. Let me adjust my seat. That's starting on September 21st, right? And as I was at my desk, I was just writing some stuff down that I was thinking about sharing with the ladies on Thursday. So I started off, right? First of all, this is not new. This is nothing new. Like anytime I have a thought, anytime I want to process something later that I can't process at that very moment, I just jot down a few things that I'm thinking about, or something that maybe stood out to me as I was listening to a sermon or a teaching of whatever. And so this was like, it's nothing new, but I realized that after I folded the page clearly, right? So after I filled out the first page, I'm like, oh wow, there's more stuff coming to me. I then filled this out. Once I got to the third side, I'm like, oh, then I had like this little, I'm like, whoa, okay. So my heart has just been racing, right? And I had to pause for a second. I walked to the living room, to the bathroom, and I had a conversation with God in my mind, and was asking him, like, what's going on? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? And the Holy Spirit was just showing me that it had been a long time since I've thought about my journey, and what it took for me to come to the faith. And as I'm sharing, I'm pretty much sharing my testimony. So this is my first time actually processing my testimony from beginning to end, like up to this point of my life. And I have felt this way in the past whenever the Lord has pressed upon me to share something. And I said, okay, I think this is more than just me having to share this with the ladies. I think this is something that is worth documenting because it's my testimony. And so I know that in order for me to feel light, this heaviness that I'm carrying has to be released, right? And in order for me to release, I have to share. And this is something that has happened often on this journey with the Lord. And so I am recognizing that in order for me to get back to feeling light, I need to release this word that the Lord wants me to share, which is my testimony. So I started off with saying, who am I? And I wanted to share what this Bible study, like how this Bible study came about. And so I'm just going to, I don't know how this video is going to turn out. I don't even know if I have enough storage to share everything that I'm going to be sharing. I don't even know how long this video is going to be, okay? But if I'm able to capture everything that I believe the Holy Spirit wants me to share, this is what I'm going to be sharing with the ladies on the day of our first gathering. So, yeah. Okay. So, I'm nervous, and this is wild because normally I'm not nervous because I'm just sharing stuff about my life, but this is different because as I was reflecting, I felt like I was reliving some of those moments. And so I feel like that's the reason why I feel all these different emotions, although I'm not where I once was. But I know all that I've gone through, and I know all that the Lord has brought me through, and how far I've come, and it's only by the grace of God. So I just pray that this encourages anyone who may find themselves at any parts of my journey. If you resonate with anything that I have to share, whether you can resonate with it now, or you see or you watch this video years later, or I don't know, and you're able to resonate with anything, I just pray that it blesses you and that it encourages you, and that you are reminded of how sovereign and mighty the Lord is. And that if he did it for me, he could do it for you too. Okay. So I came to the faith in 2010. That's when it all started. I had found myself in a very dark place. So I wrote it down, and so I'm choosing to share what I wrote down only because I don't want to get off track and start speaking about things that maybe is irrelevant to what it is that the Lord placed on my heart to write. So I just want to make sure that I don't, this is my life. So of course I remember. I just don't want to, there were certain things that I wanted to share, and the Holy Spirit just had me cross it out. Like, that's not necessary. Don't worry about it. Keep going though. So I came to the faith in 2010. I had found myself in a very dark place. That was when I started to search for truth. Like, I had been seeking for truth, and I knew that, I had done all the partying, I had done all the drinking, and none of it filled this void that I had been seeking to be filled, right? And at this point, I was just searching, like, what is this thing that's supposed to fill me up, that's supposed to fill this void that I'm desperately needing to be filled. And so I found myself empty. I was very, very sad and having very destructive thoughts that I felt like kept me stuck. So I had tried seeking for a therapist during that time. And during that time, I had insurance, but my insurance didn't cover therapy. And it wasn't something that was talked about a lot. So I didn't know too many people who went to, I didn't know anyone who went to therapy. So I didn't know who to turn to. I just went on Google. I think it was Google or Yahoo or MSN. I don't know. It was one of those search engines. And I remember just searching for a therapist nearby. And I had found one who was just 30 minutes from my job. No, I'm sorry. Maybe 45 minutes. The session was 30 minutes and it was $60. So I'm like, that's a lot of money. At that time, this was 2010, right? So I'm like, wow, $60 only for 30 minutes. All right. And I went, and she shared with me, looking back, I'm like, wow, she shared things with me that were necessary, but I just wasn't ready to accept. I didn't want to hear it. So I, made up an excuse to justify for me not wanting to go back. And I didn't. So I subscribed to this newsletter for Tiny Buddha, which, would always share positive messages. And I felt like that was something that I needed because I was such in a negative place and with a negative mindset that I needed anything that would help me to think positive. So I did, and that helped me, but it still left a void, right? So I was in a relationship with Edison, who I had been with since I was 15 and he was 17 years old. Obviously we started out very young, and we had our son when I was 23. And at this point I was living with him and his parents. But when I was like 5 weeks pregnant, I had found out that he had been cheating on me. We decided to stay together because when I was pregnant, 2, we had been together for so long. 3, my parents had already moved to Florida. And 4, I was engaged. So young, but I was engaged, and I loved him. He was all I knew. I didn't want to not be with him. Plus, I wanted us to have this family together. Did I mention that I had miscarried? Yes. So I had miscarried the year prior. So this was around 2006. Yeah, this was around 2006. It may seem like I'm all over the place, but I'm hoping that you're following. So all of this took place. I miscarried in 2006. 2007, I found out I was pregnant. I was 5 weeks. At 5 weeks, I found out that Edison had been cheating on me. And I had made the decision to go back to Florida. I, booked the flight, went to Florida. He followed me. He wanted to have a talk with my parents to convince them that he loved me and wanted nothing more than for us to be a family. I said, all right, well, if you want us to be together, then the only way is for you to get me up out of your parents' apartment and to get our own apartment. So I had an appointment to see the doctor maybe a month after that, within a month time. And so within that time, he had found an apartment, and I had already moved back, came back to Jersey, and we had moved into our apartment. Now, granted, we didn't have anything. All we had was a mattress, and we had somebody donate us some couches. So that's pretty much all we had. And then of course we put everything else on credit cards. So our debt, forget about it. And so we did that. I didn't give myself time to even feel what I was feeling. Of course, on top of everything that I had already been feeling, I was young. I really didn't process my miscarriage. And now I'm here finding out I'm pregnant, but finding out also that I had been cheated on by someone who I thought would never cheat on me, right? So I'm processing all of these different things. On top of that, I'm not even allowing myself, though, to feel any of those things. And I remember just crying myself to sleep for months and just begging him. Actually, I would cry myself to sleep, but always asking him, like, why did you do this to me? Why did you cheat on me? Was I not enough? What could I have done differently? So it was more me feeling like I was at fault for why he cheated. And that went on for a long time. All of the feelings that I felt, I suppressed them. But during this time while we were still together, I still would catch him cheating on me. I would find emails, I would find text messages. I remember even catching him having a conversation with my neighbor's cousin downstairs as he was helping her change her tires, and he was in the backyard, and he didn't know that I was in the bathroom inside the bathtub standing, so I could hear the conversation that they were having. Like, it's wild to think how far, how bad it got. But of course, I remember also, just begging him, like, just stop hurting me, stop breaking my heart. And I would write stuff down on my laptop and leave it open so that when he would wake up to go to work and then go to school, he would be reminded of just how heartbroken I was, and hopefully would feel bad enough not to cheat on me on that day. Like, I think about it now and I'm like, wow. So that's what happened, right? I just hate that I'm having to read this because it just doesn't feel organic, but everything that I wrote is exactly what happened. So I just don't want to, like I said, I don't want to leave out anything. Okay, so I have here, after some time, I had just stopped caring. My heart just, after some time and after just begging and hoping and praying that he would change, I saw that he didn't. So my heart just grew cold. My heart started to get hardened, and I just stopped caring for him as much as I had been caring. But because we had been together for so long and he's all I knew, I thought that this was just normal. I thought that being together with someone for so long, that this is just a normal thing. The only example I had of someone being together for a long time were my parents. And my parents, that wasn't a great example to follow, because there was a lot of, I witnessed a lot of verbal abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse that my mom had to endure or endured while, being with my dad. And so I saw, and I guess I didn't think about that, as I was writing that, it just dawned on me, like, wow, Jennifer, you remained in this relationship with someone that you were unhappy with because you didn't know that there was anything, you didn't know that there could be something different. You didn't know, what's the word that I'm looking for? This was just all I knew, right? So I just thought that it was just what it was. So yeah. I wrote down, I had graduated from college in 2009 with my associate's degree, but I had decided to go back for my bachelor's, and took night classes and worked part-time at the YMCA. I went to class one night, and this girl in my class told me that this dude who kept walking by in the hall was feeling me. It was my first time ever seeing him. I wasn't there for nothing else than to do my work and be out. So I would work part-time, come home, make sure, the baby was good, and go to school. And I remember the girl telling me, like, that dude that keeps walking by, like, he's feeling you. And I remember telling her, like, and like, I'm engaged, 1, 2, I have a son, and I ain't got time for that. Now, I was unhappy. I wasn't happy in my relationship with Edison. Now we're in 2009, right? Because this was years later now. When I found out I was pregnant, it was 2007. Gave birth to Armani in 2008. 2009 was when I graduated, and then shortly after I enrolled and went to pursue my bachelor's degree, and I took night classes. After taking my going to class maybe a few weeks in was when I had this class with this girl, and that's when she had told me about this dude who kept walking by. And I didn't really get a good look at him until class was over. And as I was walking to my car, she was talking to him, and I knew that it was him because of what he had on. Like, I was able to get a good look at what he had on when he walked by, but I couldn't really tell what he looked like. And so as I walked past them, I texted her and I said, girl, he is fine, right? This was how I was saying it in my mind, but I texted her that. And she took it upon herself and gave him my number. So he texted me. I don't remember if it was that same night, but he texted me. I didn't think, again, I felt like, whatever, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like, I didn't think that it would turn into anything. I just felt like, because of all that I was already experiencing, I felt like maybe this could just be my escape, just, to entertain him, just, I don't know, as an escape, I guess. I could have a friend, I would, convince myself of, and then I'm like, okay. But the more that we texted, the more that we talked, the more that we spent time together, because now I stopped going to classes. I pretended I was going to class, and instead I would go in and hang with him. So now here I am, cheating on Edison, doing to him what he had done to me. Now, it wasn't, in my mind, I wasn't like, payback. But it was, I didn't plan for this, right? And it's wild to think that this guy was everything I dreamt of, but never thought could be possible. So here I am meeting this dude who I thought was just, just gonna be something for fun. Didn't even think that I'd ever meet up with him. I just thought that it would just be, just conversation over the phone. And now all of a sudden I'm developing feelings for him. And Edison doesn't know anything about it. Around this time, money was tight, and Edison had decided to make ends meet. He had became, cool. Well, he knew these guys, but became closer to them, and they were hustling. And so he felt like, well, money's tight. I could just hustle for a little bit, and we'll be good. And so he did. But unfortunately, he had sold to an undercover cop. So now he went to jail, got released, and his sentencing wasn't going to be until 2010. Again, we're in 2009 at this point. 2010, I'm still, okay, so 2009, he goes to jail, comes out. After a few months, he finds out that I was talking to this dude, because I guess I had lost my phone, and my way of communicating with this dude was by email. And so I desperately wanted to stay in communication with him. So I went as far as logging into my Gmail on Edison's phone. I gave him back his phone when he needed it. And I remember we were at a car wash or something. And I remember him getting back in the car and giving me that look. And I just knew. I'm like, he knows. So I couldn't lie to him. I wasn't going to deny it. In a way, I felt happy that he found out, because I hated the fact that I was keeping this from him. And, we didn't know what to do, though, because we were living together. We were actually staying at the apartment that my sister had, but she had moved out, and moved into her boyfriend's house at the time. So the apartment, it was still hers, but we were still living in it. So we had to stay there because her lease wasn't going to be up, and she wasn't going to move back, so she wasn't going to continue paying for rent. And I think around that time we were helping her with rent and other bills, debt. There's a lot that happened, that transpired. We were no longer living in our apartment. At this time, we were living in her apartment. So a lot was taking place. And so, I hope I didn't confuse you there, but yeah. So, he found out. We eventually decided that that's it. It was going to be over. He moved back to his parents' house, and my father had moved back. They decided that my parents were unhappy in Florida. They decided to move back to Jersey. My sister had twin girls, or was expecting. She was pregnant at this time. She hadn't given birth to them yet. And my parents decided that they wanted to just come back to Jersey and be with us, because we had no plans in moving to Florida. And they were unhappy. Like, we had always been so close, so they wanted us to always, they wanted to help us with our kids. And so my father first came down. So now my father was looking for work and was helping me with the rent. I think, like, there's bits and pieces of it that are still like kind of blurry to me, because so much was happening around that time. And so I was still dealing with this dude and developing more and more feelings for him. Fast forward to 2010, Edison was getting sentenced. So he gets sentenced, and he was sentenced to 5 years. Now, here I am with a 2-year-old who is not going to have his dad for 5 years. And I'm in this relationship with this man, with this dude, who I'm thinking I'm going to just spend the rest of my life with. But how do I do this while still respecting Edison while he's in jail? Now, I had been dependent on Edison for so long, for so many years. So him getting locked up, although I'm in a relationship with this dude is just getting to know me. I'm just getting to know him. He's not going to be there for me as Edison was. So now I am having to depend on myself, right? I'm still searching for truth, right? I'm still trying to fill that void, but I'm not paying too much attention to that, because my main concern is, how do I live? How do I go to work and do what I have to do for my son? My mom moves back to Jersey. So now we're all in the same apartment. My mom, my dad, myself, my son, in a 1-bedroom apartment. Me and Armani had to sleep in the living room. My parents were in what, would have been my sister's room. And her lease was coming up. Like, her lease was up. So we decided to get an apartment together. So we moved into our apartment. And now I have my own room with Armani. And my parents have their own room. And now we're good. By the grace of God, Edison was approved to by this program that allowed him to be released after 4 months of being in jail. He's released. And now I'm having to learn to figure out, right? Because now for 4 months him being in jail, I am with this dude developing even more feelings for him. I'm seeing him more often because I don't have to worry about Edison having a problem with, me leaving Armani with my parents. That's one thing I didn't do. I didn't bring Armani around often. And anytime I did bring him around, this dude, I say this dude because his name is irrelevant, but I didn't bring Armani around often. And anytime I did bring him around, it was as if I wasn't with this dude, right? Because I wouldn't kiss him in front of Armani. I wouldn't hold hands in front of Armani. Like, I didn't do none of that because I didn't want to. It was bad enough that Armani couldn't see Edison. And I didn't know how I was going to do it for 5 years, right? Because he still hadn't been approved for the program. And we didn't know about the program until like maybe a month or two later. So all of this is happening. And I don't know if all of these other things that I'm thinking of are necessary to mention, but just want to see where I left off. I don't know. I think I wrote something here. I don't know. Yeah, he gets sentenced by the grace of God. He gets approved by this program and he's released after 4 months. Okay, so he gets out and it's super hard. It's super hard because now I'm having to learn how to co-parent while being in a relationship with another man who I'm in love with, madly in love with this man, and who I am seeing myself spend the rest of my life with him, get married, maybe have kids in the future, but I have no desire to have any kids as of yet because I had my 2-year-old. Even though I didn't love Edison in the way that I used to love him, I promised him that I would always be there for him. I promised him that I would never turn my back on him. I promised him that I was going to, that I wasn't ever going to, I was never going to turn my back on him. He had done so much for me. And even though we weren't together anymore, and even though he had cheated on me, and even though he, did whatever, I knew that there was also, maybe at the time I didn't know it. Obviously, looking back, I know that just as much as I was trying to fill a void, he was filling a void too, or trying to. And I had forgiven him, and all I wanted was for us to be the best parents that we know that we wanted our son to have. Now, we couldn't bless him in a way where we could have him have his parents under the same roof. What I didn't want is to have his parents, against each other or having to go to court. Like, I remember a friend of mine telling me, like, girl, you need to put on child support. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, why? Why do I have to put him on child support? Anytime I ask him for money, he gives me. There's no limit. Like, there's and why would I want to put him on child support if he's just getting back on his feet? And he never gave me any problems. He would see him even on the weekends. Like, we didn't even have an agreement, like, okay, it's every other weekend. Like, he wanted him all the time. Edison was the most amazing father any child could have that didn't have both parents living under the same roof. Like, I had no problems with Edison. And I know that I had many friends and still have many friends that don't have that opportunity to say this, don't have the opportunity to say the same. And my heart breaks because it's like, at the end of the day, it's about the child, right? So anyway, fast forward. I always told him that I was going to support him in any way that I could. Now, what made it easier was the fact that my man, right, at the time was super supportive about it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm good. I have the best relationship with my son's father, and my man has no problem with it. He's supportive, like he's cool with it. Like, how much more can I ask? Like, what else could I ask for, right? So I'm like, I hit the jackpot. Like, this is my man. And but I had found out something about my man that made me lose trust. So now I said, when I had found out something about my man that made me lose trust in him, and this was all while I was searching for truth. I was raised Catholic, and I believe that's when the seeds were being planted. I had gone back to church. I visited several Catholic churches, but I just couldn't connect in the way that I needed. But I didn't know nothing else, so I just kept visiting different Catholic churches, hoping to find, what I was looking for, whatever that was. I didn't even know what that was, but I felt like I wanted to, like, I would tell myself, like, okay, I'm gonna know that this is the church, right? I thought. And so I would visit Catholic churches because I was raised Catholic, so I didn't know nothing else. Like, and it's crazy to think that for me, I can only speak for myself, being raised in the Catholic church, all that time I thought that it was just being Catholic. And there's so many religions out in this world, but I thought that being Catholic was just it. If you believed in God, if you believed in God, then it meant that you were a Catholic. I don't know. That's what I thought. I was baptized. I did my communion. I did my confirmation. I knew about God, and that's why I believe that being raised Catholic was when the seeds were planted. So I would go to visit a few churches, and still couldn't connect. And so Edison, I would always drag Edison along with me. So now, then I wonder why. I would always wonder, like, why would people think that we're still together? Hello? I would do anything and everything with him. Like, if we went out, with Armani, I knew what it felt like to have both parents in the household, even though it was so destructive and so toxic. I just knew what it was like having both parents. I didn't want Armani to feel anything different, even though we weren't living together, right? And so I wanted to make it as normal as possible for him, even though he was young. So if we went out together, we had family, dates. We would go out as a family, the three of us. We even, I would drag him along with me to go to church, but it would just be him and I. He was my best friend. And while all of this is happening, my man is from a different town, right? So, and he was cool with it. Like, I mean, obviously I didn't tell him certain things that I would go to church with my son's father, but I would go. And I knew that I wasn't doing anything with Edison. So it was like, well, I don't need to tell him. Plus he's my best friend. So I would go. And his father was a Christian. And so I remember his father would always tell me, like, I remember one day driving and passing a cemetery, and I did the sign of the cross. And he was like, I remember I was sitting on the passenger and he was on the driver's seat. And he's like, you don't need to do that, right? I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. He's like, okay. And he would always have worship music on. I had never heard music like that before. And I remember Edison telling me one day, like, why don't we just try to visit my father's church? I'm like, okay. So I went, and I'm like, where's the holy water? I'm laughing, but I hope that it doesn't offend anybody. But this is just my experience. I'm like, where's the holy water, like when you first come in? And he's like, no, we don't have that. And come to think of it, I'm like, wow, Edison was super supportive too. The fact that he was raised Christian, but was supportive of the fact that I just wanted to go to church. And he's like, well, wherever you want to go, I'm going to go. And I would see these people just raising their arms, and I'm like, closing their eyes. I'm like, okay, when is it time for me to kneel? He's like, we don't do that. I'm like, what about the holding hands? He's like, we don't do that. So I knew enough to know, like, I went to church growing up. I didn't go often, but I went to church enough so that I could do my communion, I could do my confirmation. But I just knew of the traditions of the, I'm like, where do I go to confess my sin? He's like, we don't have to go to a particular place to confess. You can confess your sin here between you and God. I'm like, but I need to speak to somebody. He's like, yeah, you. I'm like, this is weird. And so I felt like I was betraying God, or betraying, my faith. But I didn't know what my faith was. I was still trying. I was battling. I'm like, all right, so there's Catholicism, I think that's how you say it, and there's Christianity, and then I'm like, what's happening? And I remember my man telling me, like, yeah, because now I'm talking to him a little bit more about church and me wanting to, like, I'm visiting churches, and he's like, well, my uncle, he's a Muslim, and but I remember going to a Christian church, but I hadn't been to church in a long time. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But he's from a different town. So I'm like, okay, well, if you don't care for it, at least I have Edison who's, coming along with. So whatever. And that's when I started to search, what's the difference of being a Catholic, and what's the difference of being a Catholic and a Christian? And I'm like, okay, wow. I felt like what I had been looking for anytime I would visit a Catholic church, what I was looking for was what I was experiencing going to a Christian church. Then I started to learn more about God, learning more about who Jesus was. I didn't even know that. I knew about God, and I would hear about Jesus, but I didn't know that Jesus was God in flesh. Do you get what I mean? Then I didn't even know about the Holy Spirit. I didn't come to really, really, really know about the Holy Spirit until a few years ago. Crazy. Anyway, all of this is happening, and although now I know Jesus, right? I'm going to church. I was still with my man. I was still sleeping with him. And he was a little older than me. He was hitting his 30s. And so he wanted so bad to have a baby. And he figured, like, you're my girl. You're an amazing mother. I want to have a baby by you. And I'm like, heck no. My son is 2 years old. At this point now, he's like 3 or 4. Can't remember. And I'm like, no, I can't have a baby. But I get pregnant. Now I get pregnant. I'm begging God to do something, to help me. I didn't know what he was going to do. I don't know what I was praying for. All I was just saying, please, Lord, just help me. I promise you, I won't have sex anymore. A week later, I started spotting and I miscarried. Whether it was God's way of answering my prayer or I miscarried. Now, after I miscarried, I little by little forgot about the promise that I made to God. So even though I was still having issues with my man, I knew that now I was starting to feel convicted, and I didn't know what conviction was, right? So now I'm like, I have this feeling of knowing that I shouldn't be with this person, but I'm still with him. But why shouldn't I be with him? And because at this point, I really didn't have a relationship. Like, I didn't know about the Holy Spirit, that whenever I would have this conviction, I didn't understand it fully. And so I get pregnant again. Now, my man didn't know. I say my man because he was my man at the time. My man didn't know that I miscarried. I didn't want to tell him. The only person that knew was Edison. Edison was the only person that I told. And it broke his heart when I told him. And you might be asking, like, you told him? Yeah, I told him. He was my best friend. I told him everything. And some of my friends would be like, Jennifer, like, you told Edison things that really aren't necessary. And I did tell him things that weren't necessary, but I told him, and I told him that. And it broke his heart, but he was there for me. And so I get pregnant again. And who do I tell? I tell Edison. And it breaks his heart. Because now, while me and my man were having problems, we had broken up for a short period of time. But that same week, I was very, very, very vulnerable. And I had been with somebody since the age of 15. I was never by myself. Never by myself. So now I'm breaking up with my man. And I have Edison, who will do anything for us to be together again. But I don't want to be with him. But I'm not with my man. And I feel lonely. And one thing leads to another. Me and Edison sleep together. But then during that same week, me and my man got back together. And I slept with him. So finding out that I was pregnant, backtracking and thinking about when that happened, I'm like, I don't even know who the father is. So as I'm telling Edison, Edison's heartbroken because one is like, he's happy that he could be the father, but then can't be fully happy because there's a chance that my man could be the father. So I'm here having to make a decision, feeling like I have no other option but to have an abortion. And I don't say that lightly, because I had to go through a process to finally get to a place where I can talk about it and not cry, or I can speak about it. And so I knew, I always heard, like, I had friends who had abortions, and I knew of people who had abortions. So I knew enough to find a Planned Parenthood that was far away. And I knew enough not to take too long, because the longer I waited, the more I showed, and the more I knew that there was a baby growing on the inside of me. But I felt like my only option was just to have the abortion. The only appointment that was available was on the day of my man's birthday. It was the only Saturday they had available. The next available appointment was like maybe a few weeks after that. I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't walk around knowing that I was carrying a baby that I was going to end their life. Can't sugarcoat it. Like, it is what it is. That's what I was doing. I was preparing to end this baby's life, and I couldn't find it in my, I couldn't walk around knowing that this was going to happen, and I was just going to allow this baby to grow and grow and grow. So the soonest appointment was available, and that was the soonest, and that's the appointment that I took. So now I'm here having to process all of this, all while still happening on the day of my man's birthday. I'm having to tell him that I'm in the hospital and that I'm miscarrying the baby. He wants to see me. I'm telling him no because I'm with my mom. And I don't know what excuse I made. I told him, don't worry about it. They're going to release me from the hospital. I don't know how he couldn't figure that out. But the paper that I saved from my first miscarriage to show that I miscarried was the paper that I showed him when I told him that I miscarried. He didn't realize what date it was. And it wasn't too long after, but it was, it was months. It wasn't a year later, but it was within that year. And I told him I miscarried, saw him that day. But while in the clinic, right, and walking inside, I remember this lady who obviously was trying to keep me from going in there to have the abortion. And so I told Edison, I said, do not allow me to stop. No matter how much they try to stop me, do not allow me to stop. But then deep down, although I told him to take me in there, a part of me wished that they held on to me tighter than he did. Because I was scared. I wanted to have the abortion only because I didn't know who the father was. And I didn't want to find myself in this situation. Never thought that I'd ever find myself in this situation. And I think it's time for me to go back to work. Oh my gosh, it's already 46 minutes. This is crazy. But I see why God wanted me to share this, because the Bible study was going to last for about an hour and a half. So I'm hoping to share this with the ladies maybe prior to obviously that day, so they can just hear my testimony. But after making that decision, I remember sitting in the clinic, seeing I was numb. I saw a bunch of women there, young girls, different ages. I remember this one girl with her mom. She stormed out. She cried and said, I can't do this. I don't know if she ever came back inside because I was called in and I was next. And it was just so surreal. Like, I couldn't believe that I was doing what I was doing and that it had gotten to that point. And I remember at that very moment, I'm like, okay, God, I'm done playing games with you. It was scary because the only person that knew that I was there was Edison. So I didn't know anything could have happened to me. I could have died. So I woke up. It was a room where many of us were recovering at. It wasn't like your own room. It was like a bunch. It's wild. And I woke up, and the clinic was like maybe an hour and a half away from where I lived. So I wasn't worried about seeing anybody that I knew. But and even if there was somebody that I knew, I probably was so like, I felt like a zombie, that maybe I wouldn't have recognized or maybe noticed them. But I was hoping that I wouldn't know anyone. So when I went, I woke up and I made a promise to God that I knew I had to keep, because now it had went too far. So I made a decision to not have sex anymore until marriage. So now this is a decision that I made without consulting with my man, right? So I tell my man about this, and he's like, how dare you? How do you make a decision without talking to me about it first? Like, you got to also think about my needs, right? Is what he tells me. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, boy, you have no idea what I went through. He thinks I miscarried, right? So he doesn't know the severity of all of this. Is that the word? Forgive me. You know which word I meant. So he doesn't know. But I'm still with him. One, I love him. So even though I know that, looking back, it was God's way of showing me, like, this is not who I want you to be with. But I felt guilty that, one, I had the abortion. Two, he didn't know about it. Three, it happened on his birthday. And little by little, he started to, because also around all of this time when I had found out that he had been lying to me to prove to me that he was serious, he also then started going to church, but he went to the church by where he lived. So he was like went for Bible study, like Wednesday Bible study. He joined the men's ministry. He attended to help like the youth. It was like, so I'm like, God, you're doing something. Like, we're meant to be together. But when I made the decision to not have sex anymore, he was like, how are you gonna make a decision like that without us first talking about it? So we lasted a year, and within that year, he had left the faith. So now he no longer believed in Jesus. So now I felt responsible to bring him back to the Lord, because maybe the reason for why he stopped believing was because I miscarried, and maybe he was blaming God for it. And so I felt like it was my duty to bring him back to the Lord. And but it just got worse and worse, because my faith, I was still a baby Christian, so his faith and what he believed in was much stronger than my faith in Jesus. But it wasn't strong enough to make me turn away. And I don't think that it was me. I think it was God's hand on me, God's grip on me, that wasn't willing to let me go and wasn't going to let me go. But because we have a free will, at the end of the day, I had the will to choose what I wanted to do, whether to remain in this relationship or not. And I chose to remain in this relationship, but I was losing myself in the process of it. And I remember getting on my knees and praying and asking God, Lord, because then I would break up, get back with him, break up and get back with him. And I remember getting on my knees by my bed and begging God to help me, that if he's not the man that he has for me, for him to strip him out of my life. Not too long after, my man said, I can't be with you, Jennifer, because the man of God that you want, I'm not who that is. I'm never going to believe in Jesus to be my Lord and Savior ever again. And I know that's what you're looking for. And if you can't accept me for having the faith that I have in my belief, we can't be together. And he broke up with me. And I remember being in the shower one day on my knees, begging God to bring him back to me. And the Lord reminded me in that very moment of the night that I prayed, asking God to strip him out of my life. And we can ask God for something, and sometimes how he chooses to go about it may not look like what we planned or hoped for. And I felt rejected. It was a heartbreak that was super hard to heal from, because then I learned that he was a narcissist and that I had been with someone that was a counterfeit. So now who this man was revealing himself to be was this person that he had always been, but I had only known him to be a certain way, which was the man that I fell in love with. But now who he was showing up as was not someone that I knew. But I'm like, how is he who he is? And I blamed myself for it. So I was just battling. And that was how I came to fully surrender when he broke up with me. And I told God, I'm only going to be single till August. And we broke up like in March. Well, he broke up with me in March. And this was 2014. And I'm like, till August. I'm just going to give you till August. And it's so crazy to think how we can say what we want to say, but God is so sovereign that it's all right. You want to be single till August, you're in for a big surprise. I had been single I was single for about a year and a half after that. And within that year, I learned so much about myself that although I was pointing the finger at my man, at my ex, there was so much that the Lord was showing me about me. And that there was so much that I played a part in the toxicity and just what was happening in my life. And the only way to fill the void that I had been seeking to fill was to fully surrender to him. And so that's how I came to Jesus. For real. And I'm sure there was so much more to it that I may have written down that I didn't get to, but I believe that everything that I shared was exactly what the Lord wanted me to say. So I gotta get back to work. All right, toodles.